Prescription and illicit drug addiction and abuse.
Prescription drug abuse health concerns. Prescription pill misuse, abuse, and addiction affects all ages, teenagers to elderly, the rich, middle class, and poor. This population can function in society for a time. They can function in their jobs, homes, and social lives, but addiction can worsen and take them to a non-functional level. Prescription pill abuse can cause addiction to illicit narcotics as well. It can cause issues with cardiovascular system, respiratory system, GI system, liver, and kidneys.
Some of the health concerns of illicit drugs are high risk of infection, poor decision making, and unhealthy side effects. Some example of illicit drugs are heroin, marijuana, and meth. These drug addictions to these hard drugs often take over the life of the affected people, and it can oftentimes result in the loss of job, family, income, and their home. The media portrays a lot of these drug abusers as very dirty and scary people. A lot of shows for younger people can make drugs look very cool, which is damaging for that younger population. And it also gives young people a higher chance of starting these drugs earlier.
Family support is extremely important for the success and recovery of an individual with an addiction. Family support can provide, or family can provide emotional support, psychological support, physical support, vocational support, which can help the addict with stability and their success in recovery. Lack of family support and guidance can create lack of hope, no reason to get off the drugs, depression, lack of responsibility, gives them no accountability, and lack of role models.
Peers play a very big role in drug use. Young people can have peer pressure from their friends, and it can influence them to make poor decisions they wouldn't have made on their own. Also, depending on the people that you know, it could be easier to find drugs, or on the other hand, to find the help needed to tame addictions.
Um, Addiction is cyclic in nature. It is a deceptive illness, and people get trapped in the cycle of addiction. Family studies suggest that half the risk of becoming addicted to drugs depends on the genetic makeup. A person's health is a result of dynamic interactions between the environment they are in and their genes. If raised in a family of medication, drug abuse, or addiction, the individual is more likely to adapt to that lifestyle, usually at an early age.
So, some of the systems in place to help people suffering from illicit and narcotic drug abuse through the state. There is a website, the Utah Addiction Centers, where you can find treatment centers near you. And they also have a link that helps you find peer groups and support systems to help you get off those addictions. And on the national level, if you go to the American Addiction Centers, you can also find rehab centers and addiction support groups near you.
Some potential barriers are a lot of the population has stigmas against people with addictions. They have a misconception that drug users are homeless, they're not responsible, cannot maintain employment, and are not reliable. With religion and culture, there's a sociocultural expectation that shapes the behavior and reaction of the general population to the drug users and abusers. This population may be shunned by religious people as they are thought to be liars, deceivers, and cheaters.
Internationally, illicit drug use and abuse of prescription drugs are pretty looked down on. The user can be in more danger if they live in a region that doesn't have a good supply of Narcan to administer if they overdose, and there are many places, such as third world countries, where support groups and rehab centers may not be readily available for the drug user.
Your socioeconomic status can affect your health. Higher status individuals can, or higher status addicts can have the funds to continue their addiction and hide their addiction, making them more at risk for health problems. But it can also provide them more reliable access to resources, expensive treatment programs, healthcare, etc. They kind of go both ways. Addicted persons of low socioeconomic status may have more health ailments as they have less access to resources, healthcare. They have sometimes less assistance from family, lack of funds. They're more likely to suffer from homelessness, lack of healthy food, lack of clothing, and unsafe circumstances, which will all affect their health outcomes.
Statistically, more white people struggle with the opioid dependence. This could be related to the fact that more white people tend to have elective surgeries, and especially in the United States, usually more white people are getting treatment anyway. But all races and ethnicities suffer from addictions. And so the health outcomes would not necessarily be different for each race because it affects all different types of people. It affects their genetic makeup, but that's not tied to one specific race.
Religion. Um, Religion can affect addicts because addicts because of worry of judgment, addicts can hide their addiction from their religious peers, which can in turn cause an overdose risk or a suicide risk because no one is aware of what is going on and they can use too much where they can become depressed from the use. A lot of women in our society, especially here in Utah, hide their use of prescription antidepressants and benzos because the dominant religion kind of cause a high standard that they need to live up to. This can also cause an overdose risk. Um, religious affiliations can the positive is religious affiliations can assist addicts and fund treatment to improve health outcomes. Also, most treatment programs focus on religion to help overcome addiction, like the 12-step program. Most of them are based or have a spirituality base and a God base that help them recover, and that can help their health outcomes.
Gender plays a pretty big role in the illicit drug use. Men statistically use more illicit drugs and suffer from more drug overdoses. Women are pretty close behind, but they actually have a harder time getting treatment for addictions because usually, if they have children, they have a hard time getting child care, and they are statistically not being prescribed treatment as often as men are. And interestingly, most research on addiction has been for men and not women. And since men and women are so genetically different, it would be very interesting to see more studies on how addictions, and specifically on how drug addictions, affect women. Telehealth could be very beneficial for people suffering from addiction in remote areas without the necessary resources. And anyone with online access or cell phones should have access to addiction questions if they are literate with computers. Some of the implicit biases that drug users may experience. So implicit meaning the unconscious prejudice of these illicit drug users, and these can be from the media or just taught from a young age. But most people are looked upon as dangerous, dirty, violent, and they've just made overall poor life decisions, and that's why they're drug users. Explicit biases are more conscious beliefs about the illicit drug users, and this could be from actual experience. And so, say if you have drug users living in your neighborhood and you know that they're violent, this might create a habit in the future where you avoid all drug users because you believe all of them to be violent. On the international scope, drug abuse is an international problem. It has been for a really long time. And the opioid epidemic has really opened the eyes to the effect of drugs on everyone. First world countries right now have more access to these drugs because of all the different types of surgeries and the more doctor visits that they do. But some countries have more resources for addiction recovery than others. And the United Nations has a drug report sent out every year to manage the growth of drug abuse, and they send funds and personnel to help educate and manage any um, countries that have been having spikes of certain drugs.